I always, like when people ask me, how are you doing? I'm like, caffeine and رضات الوالدين. That's it. At that time, it was Dreamwave, where like the first what you see is what you get editor. I didn't have internet at home. So I would go to, an internet coffee shop. And I remember the first thing I ever wanted to build was what we call right now Dropbox. The president of the republic, for example, at that time, Nicolas Sarkozy, was one of our customers, his cabinets, obviously. And I was in France on a student visa. And I had like 2 weeks left before, if I didn't have a job, I would have just had like to redo another year to like extend my student visa or leave the country. Well, a fresh startup is not like your typical Silicon Valley startup, First job, had to learn a ton of stuff, not only about software, but also about workplace, about how to work under pressure, about how to deliver, what are deadlines, ETAs, how to deal with customer feedback, a lot of stuff. But
it's a different story because I hate PHP, but I love Laravel.
Same.
And can you give the audience what a day in a life of a solution architect will looks like?
Well, I have in front of me 3 sensors different. One needs to work with solar panels, the other one needs batteries, blah, blah, blah. But there's another parameter here to keep in mind, which is temperature. We can do LTE through satellite, but then now we're talking about the amount of data that we can send, and we need to compress that. We need to save on bandwidth. We need to save so there's a lot of, I have no respect for a solution when I don't know the cost. If any developer is given the right opportunity within their company to work on multiple projects, touching multiple technologies, if there's a trust, if there's a will, and you're exposed to enough things, I think it takes maybe, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years, because there's no compression algorithm for experience. A 10 years experience sometimes takes 10 years. You can't take 10 years experience and learn it in 3 days. Like for some people, they just want to come to the office, they want to do their 9 to 5, they want to do their work on their tasks and go back. And because they have, other responsibilities, families, for them is just the job. And I understand that also 100%. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? Here's a fun story about video. I was part of a big team that worked helping Netflix optimize their costs. Netflix is a big user of AWS. And you know what they do? The solution that Netflix does?
And I have a fun question that I would like to ask you, because you have been working in the cloud. Is serverless really serverless?
Well, the cloud is not infinite, even if it seems like it. So serverless is not serverless, even if it seems like it. No. We all grew up, I believe, as Moroccans, eating our mother's food, eating home, yes. And you go to a restaurant and you're like, no, it doesn't taste the same. But when everyone is going towards something, I tend to go the other way. I like to go the other way. And I think that right now, everyone want to build an AI startup. AI is the sexy thing to build. Everyone want to build a machine learning startup. Everyone want to build an open AI. And that's where I'm like, no, I want to go back to manual labor. I want to build a coffee shop, a series of coffee shops if I can.
So welcome guys to Let's Code Podcast, a podcast where we interview a software engineer to share their entrepreneurial story. And here we are on the season number 2, and we are currently on episode number 3, and we have Ilyas Bahouj, a software engineer that he will be sharing his entrepreneurial story with us. He is a father first, content creator. He had a master in distributed system in Paris, France. He was born in Kenitra, Morocco. Also content creator, course instructor. We had online course at Trendy Cloud, working as a senior transformation architect at FX Innovation. And also you have been working as a lead solution architect at Amazon. So more about Ilyas Bahouj's story after this intro. Thank you, Ilyas, for accepting my invitation to be in my podcast. And can you give the audience an introduction about yourself? I mentioned a lot of things in the beginning, so can you give the audience more insight about the stuff that I mentioned in the first section of the episode?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, very happy to be here. Second of all, just a quick correction, is Bakouche. Third of all, yes, as you mentioned, I've been in software all my life. I went through the ladder. I started as a back-end developer. I did back-end, I did front-end, team lead, team director, manager. I did all. I did QA, and then at some point I decided that I wanted to dive deep into this, and I started to specialize in architecture and did that for a few years. Right now, I live in Montreal. Been here for the past 14 years. Before that, I was in France, as you mentioned. I did my first master's degree in distributed systems, and then I did a second one in recherche opérationnelle, something about mathematics and the theory behind computer science and all these algorithms. After that, I traveled quite a bit in Europe. I worked in Spain. I worked in Poland. I did an exchange semester in University of Genoa in Italy. And then, that was a while before I decided to jump ship, cross the Atlantic and come to Montreal. And that's what I've been here for the past probably a little bit more than a decade. I have a little daughter, Sophia. She's keeping us awake these days. She's just gonna celebrate her 1-year anniversary actually tomorrow.
That's really
Yeah, man. It's been a roller coaster. It's been tough, but enjoyable. It's been a journey filled with love. It's been a journey filled with, as you probably know, long nights, a ton of coffee. I'm just fueling with coffee these days, honestly. I always like when people ask me, how are you doing? I'm like, caffeine and رضعت الوالدين. That's it. That's how that's how I keep doing things.
That's really amazing. Thank you for the introduction, and really amazing to see like at the time of your story. And the first question that I usually ask to the guests is, when and how was the first interaction with computer, especially like a software engineering, like a perspective?
1998 or 1999, something around that. HTML. I used to just lock myself in my room in front of the computer and try to build stuff using Dreamweaver. At that time, it was Dreamweaver, like the first what you see is what you get editor. I didn't have internet at home, so I would go to an internet coffee shop with those discs, the 1.4 kilobytes floppy disks. I just go to websites and download pages and save those pages that explain how to use HTML on the disk, go back home and try to build something with it. And I remember the first thing I ever wanted to build was what we call right now Dropbox. And I was just a kid trying to build a place where you save stuff. And I didn't have the notion of cloud. Cloud didn't exist. I didn't have the notion of backup. All I wanted to do is build a place where I can back up the pages that I used to download from the internet and then be able to access them wherever I go. But obviously I was 13, 14, and I had no idea of how to build stuff. I was just doing it because I needed to work on something reasonably useful. And so I was trying to build that thing. It never got off. It's just something. But I learned a ton about HTML. That was the first thing. HTML and CSS and just how the things work, how the HTML blocks work. What is a div? What is a CSS attribute? What is a browser? And so that was really my first. And from that time on, I knew that one way or another, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I didn't know probably that a job like software engineer exists. At that time, we used to call them programmers. But I knew that something related to computers, that's going to be my life. That's what kicked off the whole thing.
That's really amazing. So you mentioned that you started doing this like in 1999 or 98. And this is where I was. I am born in 99. So the time that I heard you started learning how to code, that's really amazing.
Yep. Oh, we each have our own timeline,
Yeah, makes sense. And so you grew up in Morocco. So correct me if I'm wrong. And you live until maybe until your
18.
high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Fes all my life. Yeah.
That's really amazing. And after that, you study in Paris, France. computer science. You get a
Exactly.
degree in the distributed system, and after that you start your like a career as a software engineer. And what was the first job that you did as a graduated software engineer?
It was a startup called Trendy Buzz. It was in Paris, Trendy Buzz. It doesn't exist anymore because it was acquired by a bigger European startup. What we used to do, I was obviously responsible for coding the backend, some features on the backend. It was my first job as a junior developer. What we used to do, we used to build bots that would crawl the internet, crawl the web, fetch information, and then try to do sentiment analysis on that information. Let me give you an example. Our customers were politicians, were athletes who wanted to know how the public felt about them, the public perception about them. So we would crawl the web and try to find wherever they are mentioned, forums, posts. There was not really we had Facebook, but there was not like social media. It was not present as it is today. And we would gather that information, build dashboards, do sentiment analysis. We hired people who were doing PhDs in what we call today machine learning and what we call today AI. But at that point, it's more, we used to call it linguistics, analysis. Yeah, it was not LLMs. It was just we were analyzing the language that was used and trying to get insights from it, how many times a word is mentioned, how many times a positive word and negative word. What we used to do also at the end was scanning newspapers. We would get newspapers and scan them, and we do what we call today OCR, character recognition, ocular character recognition. But at that time, we didn't have these kind of names, these fancy names. We just scan newspapers, try to detect the word in, and then extract information. And so, the President of the Republic, for example, at that time, Nicolas Sarkozy was one of our customers, his cabinets, obviously. And we would send them every morning a report of everything that was said about them and how people received their perception. The founder, I'm still in good terms with him, Benjamin, I forgot his last name. He went to found another company called Datadom, which is one of the leaders in like fraud detection, bots detection, and stopping. So it's like he got all that experience from building bots and trying to understand how they work, and then he turned it into a solution on how to actually stop fraudulent bots. It was a great experience in a way that, and mind you, I was looking for a job for like 3 months before I got this experience, and I was in France on a student visa, and I had like 2 weeks left before. If I didn't have a job, I would have just had like to redo another year to like extend my student visa or leave the country. And so it was fortunate, it was lucky, it was a stroke of luck, but it was a very important and special milestone for me.
That's really amazing. And how was the experience working at this, your first job is a startup? So in a startup, you know that you have to wear a lot of hats and you have to learn a lot of things in a fast pace. How was the experience working there in a French startup back then?
Well, a French startup is not like your typical Silicon Valley startup, We had to be at the office from 9 to 8:30 to noon, and then we would take a couple of hours or maybe an hour for lunch, and then you had to stay there until 6 p.m. And then before leaving the door every day, every developer had to go to the office of the startup founder and tell him what he did today. That was like, what did you achieve today? And I remember sometimes, some days I was just struggling with bugs. I'm like, I didn't achieve anything. And I would just want to, sneak out and go out the door and do not have to talk to him. Fun times. But I remember I was working on PHP 5.2 or something. The whole thing was built on PHP, and we didn't use a framework. It was just like, at those days, there was CodeIgniter, maybe CodeIgniter came later. But I remember we were not using any framework. We were just building everything ourselves. The sessions, we were managing them ourselves. The course, it was pretty much MySQL, PHP 5.2, and plain JavaScript and plain CSS. No frameworks, and that's where...
That's really hard.
Oh, yeah. And you jump headfirst. And I had to do the dashboard was pretty much at some point was my responsibility. So I was doing PHP for the backend, I was doing JavaScript, I was doing CSS. Flash was a big thing during those days. It's a different life, different. You know how? Yeah, I remember those days. I'm like, it was tough. We didn't have the LLMs that we have today. We didn't have the amounts of documentation we have today. But I still remember Stack Overflow was a big part of our days. I used to remember, like, it was just Google and Stack Overflow. That's all we had, and trial and error. And I'm sure a lot of things that we worked on, we've pioneered in our own way. Maybe probably we should have published more things, and because I'm sure, like, we've had to solve some problems, and we had one of the earliest to have to deal with those problems, because at some point we stopped hiring developers and we started hiring PhDs, as I said, in linguistics, PhDs in information processing. Again, what we call today maybe LLMs to a certain point. We had to work on solving some problems that we just couldn't find out there. But yeah, many hats. First job, had to learn a ton of stuff, not only about software, but also about workplace, about how to work under pressure, about how to deliver, what are deadlines, ETAs, how to deal with customer feedback, a lot of stuff. But you gotta go through these things. You can read about these things all your life, but then you have to go through them. That's what shapes you.
Yeah, makes sense. There is like a theory and there is like the practice, and the practice
Yeah.
will learn a lot of things during this day. And you mentioned a lot of stuff like a Stack Overflow, and currently with ChatGPT, most of the stuff will be solved by Claude or ChatGPT or just using Cursor. So it's a lot of different things. There is like a no framework. Currently you have Laravel, which is pretty good framework to use
I
for
love Laravel.
PHP,
Yeah.
because I use it also. I use vanilla PHP back then, and I use
Yeah.
Laravel. It's a different story because I hate PHP, but I love Laravel.
Same.
And
Yeah.
also for JavaScript framework, I used to write vanilla JavaScript, but it's very hard to maintain. But currently, you have a lot of choice for framework. You have React, Vue.js,
Yeah.
Angular. You have a lot of choice, and there's a lot of things that you can use, which is really good. And it's like a luxury that we have right now as a developer, that we have to choose between two. And at the same time, it might be that we need to be picky about which tool to choose for the job, which is it's another skill to have also, to decide which tool to have, which it's mostly for solution architects. This is what he does. It's like a architect the system. And can you give the audience what a day in a life of a solution architect will looks like?
Absolutely. So days vary, but usually a typical day is between research and development, meaning I'm working on a solution and I need to pick the right solution. And there's a ton, as you mentioned, of solutions out there. So how do you pick the right solution? Well, you take a big problem, which is, building a solution is a big problem. And then you split it into many small problems, super as small as you can. Storage is a small problem. Compute is a different small problem. Database, networking, connections, bandwidth, pooling, cache, cost. And you try to solve every one of these small problems specifically. You target it. And then once you solved enough small problems, you have solved the big problems. But basically, for every one of these small problems, you have to go through the requirements that are coming from customers. And then a lot of times you have to do POCs in order to understand. So with experience, it becomes a little bit easier to choose between, I'm just going to give examples, using a no-relational database or a relational database for a specific solution. But we oftentimes have to go into the unknown, have to work, like a lot of these problems are new problems. Something I'm working on right now is how to capture with the WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation, is how to capture carbon after from forests that were burned and and send that to the cloud in order to do analysis, like carbon, soil moisture, and a lot of things. And when you think about it, oh yeah, probably I'm just gonna buy sensors and put them somewhere and then capture those. But we're talking about remote areas here. We're talking about areas where there's no Wi-Fi, there's no electricity. So that's a whole different problem to solve. So we need to, first of all, I have in front of me 3 sensors different. One needs to work with solar panels, the other one needs batteries, blah, blah, blah. But there's another parameter here to keep in mind, which is temperature. Batteries are bad when it's super cold. And we're talking about north of Canada. We're talking about remote regions where it's going to get minus 40, minus 50 C. So what we're looking at right now is solar panels that store stuff into batteries, and so the sensors that are probably 1 meter long fetch data from those batteries. Okay, so now we solved the problems of energy because we also had to reduce the frequency of readings. I cannot be reading constantly. You go back to the customer and say, hey, are you okay with making a read-in once every 24 hours? Why? Well, because there's this and this, because we need to save on battery. So we dialed in the right amount, frequency of reading, and that was once every 3 hours. So customer is happy, the solution is great. Now, how to send this data to the cloud? There's no Wi-Fi, there's no cables, there's no landing. So we had to work with a telecom provider, Bell. So we go to Bell and we say, because Bell is the only telecom who covers that region. And so what technologies do you offer? LTE? No, there's no LTE. There's no 4G, 5G, 3G. There's one thing, LTE-M. So it's like LTE, but through satellite. Okay, we can do LTE through satellite, but then now we're talking about the amount of data that we can send, and we need to compress that. We need to save on bandwidth. We need to save so there's a lot of research, POC, because I need to write also the code that would like have a scheduler that would make the read the data, convert it into whatever, clean the data, cleanse it, remove stuff that doesn't need to go through the cloud, and then write the code that compresses the packets, send them to the satellite, and then from the other side need to fetch them. That's just one part of it. The other part of it is fetching the data, where to store it, build like some kind of ETL, extract, transform, load, some kind of, there are queries, comparison, filtering, a lot of things that you need to store that in the cloud and then build a dashboard. And so typically, like a typical day is business, technology, operations, communications. There are a lot of emailing, a lot of phone calling. Sometimes you have to go on site to meet customers. But basically trying to understand as much as possible their requirements and the real reasons behind what they're trying to build, and then come up with the best possible solution for them while maintaining cost. Like, I have no respect for a solution when I don't know the cost. I need to always know the cost of the solution, how much it's going to cost today with the current usage, but also how much it's going to cost in 5 years when the usage is probably times 10. As I tell my customers, building something that works is super easy. If anyone can, like, you want me to build you this, I'll build you with WordPress. Super easy, it works. But then when you want to build something that is highly available, that is scalable, that is performant, we're talking about security, it needs to be secure, that's super hard. But the hardest thing ever for me is building something that is maintainable for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years. So you don't have to say in a couple of years, scrap that, we'll rewrite everything. That's super expensive. You need to build always something that is, sometimes modularity is the way to go. In computer science, we have a lot of tools like abstractions, like interfaces. You build an interface, so later you can change a database and you don't have to rewrite the code. We solve that using ORMs. I hate ORMs, but sometimes they are a necessary evil. Sometimes we solve that by using abstractions in the networking. So APIs is a great way of an abstraction. So modularity is a way. Building bridges between technologies is a way. And so yeah, for me, the hardest thing ever is designing and building something that can be maintained even when I'm not here anymore and someone else come after me. So documentation is also a big part of the job. Yeah. Designing and designing is not those architecture diagrams. That's not an end. That's actually just a way of communication. Sometimes I'm designing just so I can think visually. Like you put boxes and you see how they connect to each other, and you can share that with other people and get their feedback. So yes, they become deliverables. You deliver these designs, you deliver a networking topology design, you deliver, I don't know, UML. Sometimes I do it when I'm building a POC just to think about how the code would interact. And that's when you realize sometimes there's a big disconnection between architecture and programming. There's a huge disconnection. It's like programming languages did not evolve to think from an architectural point. It's like we evolved to just write code directly. When I think from an architecture perspective, there are components, there are boxes, but there is no language instructs or construct for the principle of components. Like when you look at languages, there are classes, variables, loops, data, structures, but there's nothing for network. Like I have to always, when I'm writing code, I need to build a class that would work as a networking component. Like I need to reprogram it. And we've been solving this problem. Every developer has been doing the same thing for the beginning of time. When can we build actually these constructs in the programming languages? I would be super happy. A database, like there's nothing in code that you can use as a database. What we do is we use database drivers, and then you build a class, and then you build a DTO or whatever, and then you build you use an ORM, and I understand that yes, you need to keep things flexible, but at some point, why not just encapsulate, build a specific type of class that I can use as a database, so my other classes or my models can just connect with it. And that's a database. It already has a port, a driver, a host, password. It does retries, it does all kind of things. So there's really a big disconnect, and we're always working, especially when I'm talking with developers, I'm always working into how can I transfer those concepts from architecture to like how can I speak your language? And as a developer, and I'm speaking to a manager, how can I speak your language as a manager? Talking with the CTO, how can I speak your, CFO, you don't care about these things. You only care about the cost and how can I speak your language. That's also a big part of the project.
Yes, you cover a lot of great points. And you mentioned great point that made me have a question, that how long that will take you to become a senior architect to have this perspective that you have right now for going from a software engineer? Because as a software engineer, mostly you already have the architecture designed by someone, or you can design it by yourself, but it should not be that complicated, or should not have like I would say vision or a business vision also. How long does it take you to have this vision or this perspective as a solution architect coming from a software engineering background to have all of this knowledge, so you can know like the cost of this solution will cost us like a 10 grand in the next 2 months, or maybe in the next 10 years it will cost us like a $1 million in operating cost. How long does it take you? And how was the switch going from a technical role as a software engineer to become a lead solution architect? So it will be more architecture. There will be some code there, but most of the time it will be just designing the architecture of the software.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't put a time factor on it. I would say it's all about exposure. I know a lot of guys and developers who, as you said, they are doing architecture, up to a point, because they are exposed into, or they are put in a role where they have to take these kind of decisions. Like when I was a developer, also, I had to research which type of framework I need to use and what type of database we need to use and what type. It's just that as a developer, you are not given the opportunity to step back and look at things from a wider perspective. As a developer, you are usually pushed to think of problem in a time frame of 2 weeks, your sprint. You are pushed to just think 2 weeks at a time, because every 2 weeks you get tasks and you need to solve them. As a team lead, you step back and you probably are thinking about the problems from, your time lapse is wider now, probably from one quarter, on a quarterly basis. You are thinking of 3 months ahead. Because you have meetings with the manager and you get feedback from customers and you think about how to implement these things. A product owner probably have a wider perspective, 6 months, probably think 6 months ahead. So I think as an architect, you have to think, I think about things in terms of years, like really years and 5 years, 10 years, and I'm always, with my customers, like I'm always adamant about, right now you're telling me you have 500,000 users a day. Well, I want, how many you will have in 5 years? And they're like, well, I don't know. Well, please give me, at least a ballpark, because I need to design the solution for the current load times 10, for example, or the current load times 100. But at the same time, I can't just design, bring a bazooka to a knife fight. I can't just design something super big, because it's going to cost a ton of money and there's no return on investment. So I need to find that, dial in the right numbers as much as I can. So to go back to the question, I think as long as you avoid what we call the expert beginner problem, I've seen people who join a company, work on a problem, and spend years developing that app or that solution. And the world outside has moved on. So you are an expert, but you are an expert in that specific technology. You are only building that application, using that database, using that cloud provider. The world outside, every technology is but a step to the next technology. And so right now, every 2 years, there's a new thing. And so let's say someone been working on a React application like for the past, 8 years, 7 years. The world outside has moved on. There are new things that you need to play with, but you become an expert in React, but you forget what's happening. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I see preventing people from making the jump, making the switch. I think you have to be someone who is willing to always learn new things and always ask the question, why not? This is great. It's been working great using this specific stack. Maybe if we move from PHP to Golang, we're gonna increase this by this much, and we're gonna save costs by this much, and we're gonna change the structure by this much. And then after that, you work on a different project where we are using, Python and Flask or something else. And then, so that's why I'm talking about exposure. I think if any developer is given the right opportunity within their company to work on multiple projects, touching multiple technologies, if there's a trust, if there's a will, and they're exposed to enough things, I think it takes maybe, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years, because you have to fail, and you have to fail a lot. A lot of lessons that I keep in mind right now that are rule of thumbs is because I failed at some points and I learned it the hard way, and now I don't even have to think about it. I know exactly that this thing needs to be done here because this and because that, right? For example, security as first. Yeah. I would never compromise on that, regardless. Like if the CEO comes to me and you say, no, we're going to cut money, I'm like, okay, you can fire people, but you can't compromise on security. You can choose a smaller database, but you can't compromise on security. That's something that you have to. So there are some things that you need to learn the hard way. And there's a quote from Andy Jassy, former AWS CEO, and right now I think Amazon CEO, that comes to my mind. He says, there's no compression algorithm for experience. A 10 years experience sometimes takes 10 years. You can't take 10 years experience and learn it in 3 days or 1 year. And you think that you did, but no, you didn't. And I'm sorry for everyone who takes a boot camp and thinks that now they master stuff. And I'm like, I understand you, and you have the tools to build things right now today, but it doesn't mean that you have the experience, that you gain on the battle, on the front. That's a whole different structure. It's a whole different thing. I was fortunate because I would always change a job every year and a half. That was my modus operandi. I would always change companies. I never stayed in a company for 2 years. And that allowed me to always, forced me to always be fronted or faced with new challenges, new problems to solve, new people to talk to, and new technologies. And I think that helped me a lot. But I've been doing software for like 12 years before I made the jump. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, makes sense. Got you. This you mentioned very good point, and especially I will double down on the point of taking the risk and getting out of your comfort zone, and the stuff that you mentioned about compromising experience, because you cannot like compromise 10 year experience in like 3 years, and
No.
sometimes you have to put your ego away and
Always.
be willing to learn and try new stuff. For example, in the past 2 years, I have been working as a founding engineer in a tech startup that does like a video engineering stuff, but I never had the experience of working with video. I wrote like one desktop application that's used FMPAG, which is the video technology, and through my experience working with them and taking the risk of joining them, not taking the risk but taking the opportunity to join in them, I learned so many things. I learned many things about video technology. I never knew that there's a video like a engineer role.
Yep.
And then I learned a lot of things about encoding, decoding, fragment, segment, a lot of stuff that I never thought that I can be learning. And just sometimes just taking risk and taking opportunity, maybe you think yourself that you might not be a good fit for the job, but just take it and give it a shot. You will learn a lot of things and just keep moving. So just give it a shot. You will learn a lot of things, and if you are not a fit, you can just quit or like a change job. So
Absolutely.
at least you learn something.
Yeah, I absolutely, I agree with you. There's the other side of the coin is people who take IT, software development, whatever, as a 9 to 5 job. And I get that 100%. Like for some people, they just want to come to the office. They want to do their 9 to 5. They want to do their work on their tasks and go back. And because they have, other responsibilities, families, for them is just the job. And I understand that also 100%. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's people like you and I who are passionate about learning stuff and always being in the front. We are the exception. We're not the norm. Like we tend to think that everyone who is in IT is someone who, go back home after work and codes stuff, side projects. But in my experience, it's the exception. It's really not the norm. I work every day. I still work with people who they don't want to go to conferences. They don't want to learn a new framework. They just want to keep doing things the same. And at the end of the day, I'm like, that's fine. That's like any other job, But here's a fun story about video. I was part of a big team that worked helping Netflix optimize their costs. Netflix is a big user of AWS. And you know what they do? The solution that Netflix does? It takes, as you said, like a whole video, a 2 hours video, and then segments it into small chunks of like 30 seconds, maybe 20, 15 seconds, and then encode every chunk separately. That helps do batch processing in parallel, right, rather than encoding the whole thing. And also there's retries. If this specific chunk failed, we can just reprocess it rather than having to start from scratch. And also based on the scene, if the scene has lights, it is encoded using a different codec, different parameters. If the scene is mostly sound, there are explosions, well, there are different parameters that are used to encode it. If it's night, there are different parameters. So like the movie that you see is split into a ton of tiny chunks using spot instances on AWS, and encoding is super different. That was a very fun experience to work on.
That's really amazing. And one of the projects that I was very happy to work in is this part of like having a video and encode it into segment, into like a small chunks to load it in an editor. So the user will not have to wait to load the entire video. So we will have like a segment of video loading on each time they are scrolling through the timeline. So it was a really fun experience to work on this project.
Oh, it's super fun. I mean, for a long time, we did nothing with video and audio. Like for a long time on IT, all we could do was just play, pause, forward, backward. And you compare that to text, and you could do a ton of stuff on text. You could search text, you could invert, you could style text, you could do everything. So I'm super excited whenever I see now that we can do a ton of stuff with, like, especially with AI, and we can do a ton of stuff with video, with audio. Man, I worked on this solution where for a customer service call center, where, you know, when you call a call center and they say this call might be recorded for, well, first of all, be sure it is recorded. There's no might be. And then they used to take that audio and hire people in the US who would listen to it and then transcribe it manually, and then send the transcription to analysts. And then there was, and we worked with them on a solution that was, you know, using machine learning to do transcription and things like that. And I was super happy to see that we were able to detect the tone. We were able to even infer if the customer is about to cancel. And now we got to a point before I left the project where we were able to do this live. So you're talking, you're calling the guy from or the girl from the call center, and you're talking to them, and there's an indicator live that based on the conversation, based on what have been said, based on your tone of voice, whether you really are going to cancel or you're just bluffing. Like you're canceling your contract or just bluffing. It's super exciting stuff, and I'm super happy that now we're able to do these things with audio and video.
That's really amazing. Yeah, this is really a cool project to work on.
yeah, it was fun.
So we mentioned a lot of things about the cloud, and this will lead us to the course that we have within the cloud. So it's usually like from the available course right now, you have AWS Cloud Essential and the serverless course using AWS Lambda, which is mostly for beginner. Can you give us more insight about this one and this journey of becoming a course instructor?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I get to talk about my products. So the two that you see are workshops. So there are workshops that I try to provide to beginners who want to jump and make the jump to the cloud. And again, it just goes back to my philosophy of taking a big problem and splitting it into smaller problems. And for me, you want to make the jump to the cloud. Well, there are small problems. For example, how to build a serverless solution. Another problem is how to build alarms and keep track of your usage conversion. Another one is how to optimize your database in the cloud. So I want to build multiple workshops that anyone can actually have access to. But my signature course that I call SA Magic, it's the one that started with the cloud. And I do SA Magic twice a year, once on February and once on July. Why? Because it's a live course, and I cap it to 15 people, 15 IT professionals. I don't take students at the moment because the course requires knowledge in at least basic knowledge. So I can't start from scratch, and I want everyone pretty much to advance on the same level. And so I take 15 people and I accompany them for 8 weeks, pretty much live the whole week. You have access to videos recorded, but also we meet multiple times a week where we do live FUK sessions, and I get to follow people and take them by the hand and explain really the role of becoming a solutions architect. So SA Magic is my signature course that helps you transform, make the jump from a software engineer to a solutions architect. And I try to take a lot of things that I learned and provide them in a way that is compressed as much as I can. This is not to say that you just have to take this course and call yourself a solutions architect. It's a course where I share pretty much 8-10 years of knowledge, and I try to compress them and share them in a way where you don't have to make a lot of these mistakes. For example, I give presentations on how to give a presentation to an engineer, how to give a presentation to C-suite, right? Something I learned. For example, when I give a presentation to a C-suite, I start with the agenda first. I start with the result first. Why? Okay. Because I'm always thinking, the CEO might receive a call 5 minutes into the meeting and have to leave. At least he knows the gist of it. right?
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that I learned along the way that I try to transfer. But if I'm talking to developers, if I'm giving presenting my solution to engineers, it's the all way around. I'm using storytelling. I'm talking about the problem. I'm trying to speak their own language. I'm taking them along through the journey. This is the problem. This is what we did, and bam! See, now the solution makes sense. But essentially, they don't care about these kind of things. So that's SA Magic. I didn't open it this year, closed because I had a baby, super busy. But usually just twice a year. And I have a page, I can share with you the link where people can register and put their email so they receive an email from me once I open it. Yeah.
And when this, you mentioned that it's twice a year, at which time we are talking?
Yeah, once on February and once on July. I did it for 3 years now. And the reason why I did it is when I started my YouTube channel, Win the Cloud, I would get a lot of comments, a lot of questions, a lot of people asking me to mentor them. And as much as I want, and this is something I learned during my time at Amazon, is you can't, how do I say this? You know the XOR in logic, you can't be at two places at the same time. So I can have a conversation with a customer and I can explain something to them, but I cannot be in 10 conversations at the same time. So what we did at Amazon is this principle of solving a problem at scale. How can I solve the same problem for hundreds of people at the same time? And that was the whole idea behind reInvent and this at the conferences and writing blog posts. So because when you write a blog post, you are pretty much solving the problem for potentially everyone who is reading it. And so I was thinking, now a lot of people want me to be their mentor, but I cannot be the mentor of everyone. So how can I solve this problem? How can I offer mentorship to multiple people at the same time? And that's what started the idea of Win the Cloud. And then after that, people wanted to stay within like the cohort, because it's a cohort, it's 15 people and we grow together. And at the end, we want to keep in touch with each other. So that's why I started the community, Win the Cloud community, where people join. And I share always design structures, design patterns, workshops. People ask questions. It's sort of like a private forum with like-minded people, where people can, you ask a question and you know that the answers that you will get are from people who probably have done that. It's not just random someone on the internet. And also everyone is required to put their name. Picture is fine if you don't want to, but your name, because I want you to be accountable. I want to know that I'm talking to a real human being who stand by what they say. It's just not someone talking bullshit on the internet for magical internet points. And so I was like, okay, Twitter, Facebook groups, Stack Overflow, whatever. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna follow a platform's rules and regulations only for Elon Musk to wake up tomorrow and decide to ban me. No, I'm building my own thing. I'm taking a step back. If you want to join like-minded people, there's a specific community where you can join us and we will grow together. I'm present on these social accounts, on social media, because it's my way of communicating with people. It's my way, but I try not to give it more importance that really is. It's a stupid thing on the internet. Nothing more than that. It's mad, like likes and thumbs up. It's worthless. But I see people, they go through a lot of length to just, for the buzz and for the likes and whatever. And I'm like, at the end of the day, you do whatever works for you. But you got to take a step back. It's just ephemeral, worthless points. That's it.
Yeah, got you. And can you give us more numbers about this? I would say this program, like a price and maybe revenue, if you mind sharing about this.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind. So SA Magic started it 3 years ago. The doors are closed all year. I only open doors 10 days before the start. So you only have 10 days to subscribe, and I cap the subscriptions at 15. That's 15. The course costs I need to adjust this year for inflation and whatever. But anyways, before the course used to cost 1,700 US for everyone, which gives you access to the program, live mentorship for 8 weeks, but also you have access to the community for life. You're like an OG. You get a badge and all that things, and I help you at the end to take an idea and turn it to a real project with your company. For example, if you are to join the program, when I'm doing the screening, I'm like, do you have a real idea you want to present to your company? And you'd be like, I don't know, you mentioned video. I don't know. You'd be like, yeah, I have this idea about XYZ. And so throughout the program, I'm working with you to build the architecture, the designs, the functional, non-functional requirements. So at the end, part of graduating is you are accountable to go back to your company and say, hey, I have this idea and I want to present it. And also I'm following up with you after that. So I help you build the presentations and everything. Yeah, so that's it, like 17 or 1750. I don't remember. That was last year, twice a year. Yeah, that's it. The workshops, I haven't launched them really yet. I just put them on the website. I still have a ton of them that I need to record and put them there. I've been just pushing things that I just need to sleep a little bit more, and then I'll be able to. Like right now, there's my full-time job, there's the coffee shop, there's the baby, there's a lot of things. So I put YouTube on hold, and I put creating content for the courses on hold. But hopefully one day I'll get back to it.
Awesome. I'm pretty excited to have you back to the content creator mode, so we can have more video from YouTube channel. And I have a fun question that I would like to ask you, because you have been working in the cloud. Is serverless really serverless?
Well, the cloud is not infinite, even if it seems like it. So serverless is not serverless, even if it seems like it. No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a micro VM, right? At the end of the day, it's a micro VM built with Firecracker, which is, you think about your Docker container, but it's a micro Docker container. Think of it that way. And it's a micro Docker container that takes milliseconds to boot. That's it. So from AWS perspective, they have this fleet of resources, and they have worked a magical way. Like, kudos to the professional services team who worked on Lambda. I don't know how they did it. I don't have insight into the internal architecture, but the way that when you receive a request, you're able to capture a part of resources and have it handle that request. That's how I would design it. It wouldn't be physical. I mean, physical, I would just be reserving a pool of servers, and then I would build some kind of load balancer, some kind of fancy load balancer that whenever I receive a request, my load balancer would talk to some kind of coordinator service that says, oh, this request needs 128 megabytes of memory and this much of CPU. So I'm just I'm gonna forward it to this small specific, I'm gonna give it this and process it and then give back. But I'm sure there's algorithms that do optimization there. But yeah, no, I mean, it's someone else's server. That's it. Server is just someone else's server. It's a small server
at the end.
At the end of the day. But from a business perspective, it is serverless for me. When I think of it, when I'm trying to calculate the costs, I'm trying to calculate the cost of ownership and management and deploying and CI/CD. For me, it is serverless. Yeah, you don't think about a lot of things when you go serverless.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
This is a fun question. And transition to, you mentioned the coffee shop, and also I have been following your journey building this coffee shop over Twitter. And can you give us some detail about this project and how the first idea came?
Yeah, that's a fun one. So I've been thinking. I've been fortunate to see that our industry goes through cycles. Our industry goes through usually 6-7 years. Every 6-7 years, there are cycles where we go from distributed to centralized. And then we're like, oh, maybe we're too centralized. Now we got to go distribute it. And then you see people talking microservices. And then, maybe we're too microservices. We need to centralize. So we always go doing the same cycle. Like everything, like now we're talking about immutable storage, blockchain. But like 20 years ago, we had those VCR cassettes where it was like write once, read more. Like we used to call them write once, read warm. Yeah, we used to call them warm. It's just now the cycle has, and now we're talking, we're calling them immutable storage. Anyways, so that's just to say that I've been thinking about the next iteration. What would happen when Claude is faster than me, better than me, stronger than me, and I came to the conclusion that we cannot compete with AI. At least we can compete with AI, but we will not be able to get the same salaries that we have today. Like you cannot, right now I know people at Netflix who are paid $500,000 a year, software engineers, individual contributors. But like in 5 years, you cannot justify being paid $500,000 a year as a software engineer where there's Claude version 7 or ChatGPT version 15 that can do 60% or 70% of what you do. I'm not saying it's going to replace you, but I'm saying you cannot justify the price because usually there's a rarity effect. We pay you high because you are the only one who is you are the expert in this, you did a PhD in. But when we have an AI that is trained on pretty much everything that you could see in your lifetime, you can't. So I've been thinking, what would happen in a few years? There's also another parameter to it, which is age. We tend to think about athletes. Cristiano Ronaldo, right? Soccer player. That guy is a beast.
Yes.
It's like, you look at his training regimen, you look at his diet, you look at his fitness level, he's a beast. But even Cristiano, at 35, 36, 37 years old, you can't run as fast as an 18 years old. You can't run it. There are limitations. But when we talk about software, we tend to forget this point. We think that just because we are sitting in front of a computer all day long, I'm going to be able to do this thing my whole life until I'm 60. Well, trust me, you can't. You won't. First of all, your eye starts giving up. First of all, you cannot, I used to lock myself in a room for 3-4 days and just fucking code. Now I can't. I have to take a break. My eyes need a break every couple of hours. There's a lot of things, and also your mental gymnastics, and also, I have other things in my life, responsibility. I need to think of picking up my girl. I need to do this. I need to do laundry. I need to cook food for her. We tend to forget that life creep up, and we tend to think that, because just I'm sitting in front of a computer, I'm just going to be doing this. Oh, it's easy. I'm just sitting and I have a keyboard and But as much as I do that, solving problems is it's not writing code, it's solving the problems is the hardest thing. Once you solve the problem, writing the code is easy. And sometimes solving the problem takes you 4 hours of utmost concentration. But you can't do that all day long. So that's the second thing to it. And so I started thinking, first thing is, what happens when AI and robots are here? And second, what happens when I'm just not able to justify my salary? Some people, what they do is they move the ladder, they become CEOs, CTOs, and they do business, and that's also on the table. I'm always open for that. But I always tend to think in terms of backups, plan A, plan B, plan C, and if it doesn't work, the alphabet has 26 letters, up to plan Z. And so for me, 3 domains I wanted to explore. First of all is health, because I'm when robots are here, I would still want I would still want to get a massage by a person, not by a robot. I would still want my baby to be delivered by une sage-femme, right? How do you say in English? No. Midwife, thank you. Health, robots will not take that away from us. Second thing is entertainment. Bowling with your friends, rock climbing, go into a restaurant, to a bar, having a drink, le flesh, all this kind of entertainment, football, soccer, all this kind of entertainment. I don't think robots will take that away from us. And the third thing, food. So I thought, I'm sure there will be robots that you can just they can order ingredients and they can do everything. But at the end of the day, I still want to eat a croissant that is made by a human artisan, an artisan. Or, and we all grew up, I believe, as Moroccans, eating our mother's food, eating home,
Yes.
and you go to a restaurant and you're like, no,
It's
doesn't
different.
taste the same. Doesn't taste the same. So there's always that, artisanal mastery, that art. And that's when I started looking at coffee shops. I'm like, okay, so why not, as a plan B, build a coffee shop, a bakery, an artisanal bakery and coffee shop, because we do croissant, viennoiserie, millefeuille, we do everything on place sandwiches, crêpes, tartelettes, we do everything. Plus, there's the romance of espresso. I think young people don't appreciate espresso much. I'm trying to capture a market because I have a high school next to me and I'm trying to capture that market, but I can't talk to them about the romance of espresso, about a cortado, about a good latte or a good mochaccino. That's usually adults, when adulthood hits hard,
Yeah.
that you wake up and you need your coffee shop and you need your coffee. So maybe that's a long way to answer, but just basically it's a way of having a backup, because I also think I'm trying hard not to use the word contrarian here, but when everyone is going towards something, I tend to go the other way. I like to go the other way. And I think that right now everyone want to build an AI startup. AI is the sexy thing to build. Everyone want to build a machine learning startup. Everyone want to build an open AI. And that's where I'm like, no, I want to go back to manual labor. I want to build a coffee shop, a series of coffee shops if I can, bakeries. I'm talking with other local shops like plumbers. Hey, do you need a partner in your plumbing business? I was talking to a gardening service. Hey, do you need a partner? Because I can bring a lot of IT, a lot of business development, a lot of experience on taking their local pop and mom business to the next level, like on social media, building a YouTube channel for that, TikToks, doing business development, developing applications. Like, for example, I built 3 applications for my shop just since we started, to manage inventory, to manage the cost of the recipes, how much every recipe costs you. And I'm going to submit those to the upmarket for the POS system. So it's just a way for me to hedge my bets and also bring all these years of experience that I know in IT and try to have them help another type of people, another family, another person to go to the next level. That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
sharing with us the story behind the cafe. And if you stop by in Montreal, Canada, you can visit Mistral Cafe.
Mistral
So,
Cafe.
Mistral
Yes, sir.
Cafe. The best
Mistral
one in
Cafe
town.
at Rosemont. Yes, sir. We serve the best coffee in town, the best tartelette in town, everything homemade.
That's great. That's really amazing to hear the story. And thank you so much for mentioning all the detail about the story. It will give the audience some insight about the decision of going like a coffee shop, which is not the usual IT route for someone in IT.
We know
Yeah.
normal is boring.
Yeah.
Don't fit. Be a misfit, my friend.
Yeah. And this will lead us to the last question and the last section of the episode, which is tip and resources for someone that is a software engineer that would like to get into entrepreneurship. You can anything like doing courses, doing content, anything that you would like to mention that will be helpful to someone who already a software engineer and would like to get hand dirty in tech entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll talk about the things I know, obviously, which is the creator economy, which is the indiepreneur, which is software and IT. And I believe that if you know software development, you have a huge advantage in a way that all you need is a laptop and you can start solving problems and really solving problems. I think that's the gist of it. There's a lot of solutions out there, a lot of software out there that I see, which is solutions looking for a problem. like for example crypto, and maybe some of your audience will not be happy with me, but for me crypto is nothing but a bullshit. But I know people say, oh, Bitcoin is different. No. I've been in crypto 2014, 15, 16, made some money in crypto. By 2019, I took away my Bitcoin and used it as a down payment to buy my house. For me, that's it. It was like an investment, speculation. But I'm not going to be here saying like crypto is going to save the world and Bitcoin is going to... No, like, you want to make some money in it, go ahead. It's a market. It's speculation. You try to buy low, sell high. As simple as that. So for me, you need to find a real problem and solve it. And in order to find that, honestly, I don't think you have to look far. I really don't have... We are so used to consume the stories, the wild successes of Silicon Valley people and Instagram. They were two guys and they just started and did this and now they are worth I don't know how many billions. Or you don't have to be that. Like I met a woman, une femme de ménage. She does house cleaning. She told me, because I was looking at house cleaning businesses, she told me she makes $250 for 2 hours, and she does like for clients, for customers a day. That's $1,000 a day. I was like, hell yeah! Like when was the last time you did 1,000? Like don't wait for that magical idea to come. That because I spent years for that. I spent years trying to find that sexy problem to solve and build a SaaS around it. You usually don't have to. I study a lot. I'm a big scholar of autobiographies. And I read a lot. Right now I'm reading the autobiography of Ingvar, I forgot his last name, the guy who founded IKEA.
Okay.
And you realize that these people, like the guy, he started selling at the age of 5. He was just buy matches. Like he was fascinated by the idea of you buy something cheap, but then when you go to the grocery store, you find it expensive. Why? And it's just commerce. Basically, it's a great idea to start. Buy cheap, sell with a margin, make a little bit of money. The guy started at 5 years old, buying and selling, and then he would just buy used furniture and sell it. And then, grow it into what right now we call IKEA. And he died at, 90 years old. He only built one thing. He only knew IKEA. He put his whole life behind it. So I think you just look around you, you will see a ton of problems. They are not usually sexy problems, but they are real problems, and start from there. The other thing I would say is time and be patient. We live in a time and day and age when everyone wants everything today and right now. Like it took me 3 years to have 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I talk to people and they want to have 100,000 subscribers in 6 months. And they're like, there are the outliers, obviously. If you know the algorithm and you're willing to put in and you have some lucky strikes here and there, you will. But there's a survivorship bias. Those are the outliers. Those are the exception. Don't try to follow the exception. I talk to a lot of YouTubers and we are in communities and I know the struggle. Like, that only 1% of YouTubers are actually monetized, and meaning that only, and the statistic of channels who have more than 1,000 subscribers, it's even like 0.0 something. But people say, oh, YouTube is saturated. They start like 3 months later, oh, it's saturated. I didn't reach 100,000. I'm gonna stop. Well, like, doesn't make sense. Sometimes you gotta put in the work, yes. And you gotta wait, my friend. Like, you gotta start thinking in terms of years, not in terms of weeks, not in terms of days. That's something I learned the hard way also, because I made all these mistakes. Trust me. And the niche is something also true, finding a niche and solving. Like, I'm a big fan of watches and I love Seiko as a brand. And there might be, it's not like you're a mainstream brand. There might be maybe, 1 billion super fans of Seiko worldwide. But if you build that specific thing for Seiko fans, that's an awesome thing to start. So I think you find your niche. You find a real problem. how you find a real problem where you talk to people. You invest the time it takes to do that kind of things. And another thing I will add is there is entrepreneuriat, but there's also repreneuriat. I don't know the name in English, which basically you don't start something, but you take over something. In North America, there's this generation of boomers. I don't know if you're familiar with the name. We call them baby boomers, right? After World War. And these people, they started a lot of businesses, especially in North America. When you're handy, crafty, you have a manual business, gardening, plumbing, baking, you can build a business out of it. A lot of these people, they are now reaching the age of retirement. And a lot of them are looking for someone to take over the companies because their kids, their children are not interested in it. Maybe their children are looking for the sexy AI things to build. And so a lot of them right now are just looking for someone to take over their business. So I would say look for opportunities that way. I'm sure you will find them all over the place. Starting something is exciting. Say that I built it from, but why are you doing this? Are you doing it like for fame, or are you doing it to, have enough money for your family, enough money to survive, enough money to live comfortably? Ultimately, that's what I want to be. I want to do something because, we all work. So at the end of the day, we can afford, we can offer a good life to our families. Like, I don't care about fame. I don't care about, I'd love to be like filthy rich and no one knows about me. That would be fucking awesome. But so I think that's also a way, and that's what we did when I started looking at the coffee shop and bakery. I found a bakery for someone who was just looking to retire, and we were able to negotiate good terms, good price, because she has 2 girls, and girls were not interested in continuing the business. And I talk with people like this every day, a lot of people. So I'm sure even in Morocco, I'm sure there are businesses who just want to continue. Like, they built a brand, they built a name, people will know the name, but their kids don't wanna take over. And you could negotiate some interesting deals with those people. I always tell them I'm not gonna change the brand name. Like, I'm not here to just start from zero. No, we're gonna continue the same business, same qualities, same offering. I'm just going to add my knowledge, my experience, my expertise, and we're going to help you, hire more competent people. And we're going to give the word I'm looking for, a legacy. That's the word I'm looking for. And I'm going to keep your legacy going. And I think that's also a good thing as entrepreneurs to look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is really a unique point that you mentioned that not a lot of people mention. And thank you so much for mentioning this point. It's really amazing to mention this point. And this will lead us to the end of the episode. So thank you so much, Ilyas Bakoush, for taking the time and having to sit with us and share your story. It was a pleasure and honor for me to have you in my podcast. And thank you so much.
Man, it was a bliss. It was awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.